Hey everyone, and welcome to The Scene. I'm super excited today because today, October 15th, 2023, 21 years ago to this date, an album dropped that would have an untold influence on both the bands and band members in the scene, and myself personally. That album was The Satellite Years by Hopesfall. Both chaotic and profoundly meditative, the album had a way of pulling you in from complete chaos to a trance-like state. Just a few weeks ago, the band released a 2.0 version of The Satellite Years. It's both remixed and remastered. Now, it's not that rare to have an album remastered, but remixed and remastered, that's pretty special. My guest is Ryan Parrish, the guitarist from the band Hopesfall. Ryan was an integral part in the band, from the inception of Hopesfall to the release of The Satellite Years in 2002. Ryan also played in the band Celebrity and currently plays in Parallel. Ryan and I talk about all things about The Satellite Years and his life then and now. We had a beautiful conversation about the power of music, redemption, and human connection, and how life's changes can be both profoundly beautiful and hurtful at times. So, let's get right to it, and let me welcome you to The Scene. Okay, so we are live. So, what is wrong with this? Gosh.
You're okay, man.
No, I have Logic on too, and I forgot.
Yeah,
I forgot. So I'm getting this weird.
Is that your DAW that you record into is Logic, or?
Not for podcasts. I mean, I normally just kind of I just record onto the computer through Zoom and then clean up the audio and
got it
in Logic and whatnot. And
I've done a couple of these, and some guys record to QuickTime. It's everybody's got kind of a different method. So
yeah, it works. I mean, for the most part, it works. I mean, Zoom, I'm a therapist, so I have like other video platforms that I use, but it's not necessarily like they're more HIPAA compliant and whatnot. So I don't have the
very cool, man. Yeah,
audio.
At one point in time, I'm a psych major too, and I thought I may want to go into therapy one day. I don't know. We'll see. I'd have to go back and get a master's, but
I know that's the thing. Actually, this was not what I had my undergrad in or anything like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had an undergrad in TV and film.
That's what I work in now.
Oh, really?
I work in video. Yeah, I'm a producer, so I
nice.
produce videos for a living now.
Nice, awesome.
Yeah.
Are you doing it like corporate or?
Yeah, we do a lot of corporate content, branded content, which, I mean, a lot of people think it's not super sexy, but I actually enjoy it. And, I get to conduct interviews a lot, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you're doing right now, but with a video camera, which is,
right.
I just like human story,
Yeah.
So it's a really fun job, and I get to be creative. So.
I mean, I think that's probably just thinking about it kind of because I've been doing this for 10 years now. And then before that, I did my undergrad, and I wanted, because I went to school in around New York City in that area. Well, I lived around that area for most of my life. And then I
was going to ask about the Jersey.
Yeah. I went, I went from, Ryan, you're the only person that I would give up watching a Giants game right now in progress with.
Hey, have it side screen, have it on the phone. If you lose your train of thought, I won't judge you. I get it. I'm a big college football fan. So, and I do watch the NFL a little bit, but I'd say I'm more of a casual NFL fan versus a diehard.
Well, I guess let's see. So did you grow up in North Carolina?
Well, I kind of have bounced around the Southeast. I was originally born in Mississippi, in Jackson, the capital city, which, it's not much to speak of. But so, yeah, I spent the first 8.5 years of my life there in Mississippi. My mom went to University of Mississippi. So it's in my blood, to watch Rebel football. So
right.
I've been watching it for 40 plus years of my life. So college football is like a
rules all right.
A very special thing. And then when I moved to North Carolina, I kind of got the bit by the basketball bug because,
Right.
everybody loves basketball in North Carolina. But, I used to
I
watch the
mean,
Tar Heels quite a bit.
yeah, I was gonna say Tar Heels,
Yeah, yeah,
probably. Yeah.
yeah.
So, University of Mississippi versus Ole Miss, are they this? They're not the
They're
same,
the
right?
same.
Okay.
It's just like, I guess I'd call it like a colloquial, just kind of like shortened pet name for the school, but it's kind of become their calling card, really. It's on their helmets. Most people in the state refer to it as Ole Miss. But yeah, it's the same school.
Right.
I did not attend, but again, diehard fan. So I get your allegiance to missing a game.
Yeah, it's interesting because my wife and I about 2 weeks ago were in New Orleans, and so we went because I know like Eli Manning was Ole Miss, right? Wasn't
Oh
he?
yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
Manning family, his father, was arguably the best era of Ole Miss football. Which my mom, I believe, attended when he was quarterback. I believe there was crossover there, but um, yeah.
So we went. I
Where are you
mean,
living now?
I
What part
I
of?
live right outside Portland, Oregon. I feel like this, the timing of all of this is excellent with the satellite years
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's
coming
been kind of
out.
a whirlwind couple of weeks for sure.
Yeah, how I mean, I don't even know where to begin.
Whatever feels most comfortable, man, to you. I'm kind of an open book. I don't like.
Same
I don't.
here.
I don't keep things close to the vest.
So I mean, kind of like what I like to do is just kind of start out just like early life and early musical influences, and then kind of
Mhm.
move into band stuff, and then like what's going on now and what's part of the
Sure.
story now. Not necessarily involved in the band, but anything that's just kind of like what gets you going now, or just kind of
Yeah.
what your musically working on and stuff.
Sure.
So just kind of grew up in Mississippi for 8 years. Where early part of
Mhm.
your life was music a big part of your life during?
I mean, I think my early memories of music is like being in the church.
Yeah.
I grew up in a pretty conservative household, Southern Baptist, so there was a lot of hymns. Really,
Yeah.
I remember singing in church a lot. And I think a lot of early kid memories of like riding around with your parents, and they have the radio on, or they'd pop. This is back in the days of a cassette tape. They pop
Right.
a cassette in or whatever. So I remember hearing like a lot of what my mom listened to was just like whatever was on the radio. So yeah, I was always attracted to it. I was interested in it. I think like early memories would be like Phil Collins, Genesis, Michael Jackson, Thriller was huge. And I think when my ears like started to perk up is when like, I would hear something on the radio that felt just slightly left of center.
Mhm.
And I think like what, at least kind of in the back of my mind, I think like a band like Tears for Fears was one of those that like jumped out right away to me. I was like,
Yeah.
this sounds slightly smarter, and the lyrical content felt like it had like some depth to it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
early U2, was another
yeah.
one.
I was gonna say,
Um,
I was just talking with the recent episode I released was with Jake Brown, who
oh yeah, man, Jake's
yeah.
great.
So and he was talking about how much of a huge Tears for Fears
Yeah,
fan
I
he
mean,
is and
I can
how
really trace it
inspirational.
back to like some of those bands that were playing with space and reverb and big melodies, but like I don't know. I think that's what my ear was attracted to. And then, anything that was like slightly pensive in nature,
Yeah.
like kind of pricked my ears a little bit, like Crowded House, or, I'm trying to think of some of these other songs that just like jump out at me from then. But yeah, those are my early memories of like being a kid, not like a
Right.
teenager, riding around in mom's car and singing along to the radio. So I have a lot of like, I have a huge soft spot for like soft rock,
Yeah.
like Christopher Cross comes on and I'm fully in,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not super critical of that. There's actually some really brilliant songwriting in some of those songs, but yeah, I think those are my earliest memories.
I grew up on a lot of Motown. A lot of
Yeah,
Motown and
my
Beach
dad was a huge
Boys.
Motown guy. So that's the flip side of it, was my dad was like super into like early soul, Motown, anything kind of with that R&B, like strong vocal presence was huge to
Hmm.
my dad. So I do have a soft spot for all of that as well, you know. Um
What was your
any of that kind.
first what was your first taste of like, so I get a lot of, man, so many people on that I've interviewed, like the Smashing Pumpkins becomes like this thing for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Where
I
the
mean,
first
that's the poster
time,
right there. You can
oh,
see it. Yeah.
is that their new album?
That's the door. So that would have been right after they fired Jimmy Chamberlain.
Okay.
And that's kind of like their, I'd call it their goth record, you know, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term, where they went super quiet and really, really chill. I think it's a beautiful album. I got this in like 99 or
Oh, nice.
whenever from a record store.
Survived.
I love the cover art. So
Yeah.
somehow I've hung on to it all these years.
So, I mean, like, tell me a little bit about, like, I love Smashing Pumpkins, but literally it's a theme. You know,
Yeah.
I've talked with several different people who have always just named the Smashing Pumpkins as a huge
Yeah.
influence, and I, it's like this common thread. It seems like with everybody who got into kind of more harder music or,
Yeah.
you know, experimental ish type stuff. Like, what's the thread there?
Yeah. I think, you know, I was hanging out in junior high with my buddy Jeff. Shout out Jeff. I don't know where he ended up. We were really close anyway in junior high, and you know that was like, you know, it's a common theme. The age of alternative rock and grunge specifically was just blowing up, and you know, I had seen Pearl Jam's unplugged performance and was just enamored, you know, like
Yeah.
I was just like, wait, what? Like music can be like this and it can be serious and like, yeah, because I'm kind of a serious guy, you know, like um so that was kind of my first entry point really into alternative, you know, Nirvana, obviously, Soundgarden, all of these bands. But you know, through all of that, my buddy Jeff bought the single soundtrack for that film, you know, that took place in Seattle in the 90s that was about
Hmm.
the music scene, you know,
Yeah.
Cameron Crowe, amazing director. Anyway, he bought the soundtrack, and you know, we were stoked because there were these Pearl Jam songs we never heard, you know, Temple of the Dog songs, all
Yeah.
this stuff going on. Um, and the last track, I believe it's the last track. I'd have to look at the track listing, but was a song called "Drown" by the Smashing Pumpkins, and I had never heard the band. And it came on, and I was like, "Wait, this doesn't sound
Right.
anything like these other bands." It was
Yeah.
bassy and beautiful and like deep textures. And, you know, because there was no internet, you know, I couldn't look the band up. So I thought the singer was a woman. I mean,
Right. Right.
I thought Billy was a female, the way his vocals were, and I was just intrigued by it. And, you know, and the song is like an 8.5 minute song, and I never heard a song that long. And
Right. Yeah.
that was fascinating to me. And then like I was like, wait, you can make the whole end of the song like this 4 minute feedback loop with no vocals. It just kind of blew my mind, and it made me realize like, you know, you can expand the rules, you know.
Right.
And I think that's what initially attracted me to the band, was just like their ambition. And I know that was not cool during that period of time with a lot of bands. You were supposed to like, you know, shirk ambition or kind of
Right. Right.
try to pretend like you were apathetic, you know. But I think that's what drew me to the band, was that song, and then I just wanted to find everything I could, you know. Um,
I find like most alter, so like, you know, Alice in Chains or
no, I love Alice in Chains, man.
you know, like Pearl Jam, all those, thinking about kind of now just kind of some of the social issues and things that they were just, I don't know, just not afraid to tackle, and just not afraid to go after. Like sometimes when I
Hmm.
think about some of the things that Pearl Jam wrote about, or yeah,
Yeah,
even Nine Inch Nails or any of that
yeah, I'm a
stuff.
big Nine Inch Nails fan too. That came later in life, though. I did not like them when I was younger.
Yeah. Sorry, I meant Alice in Chains. For some reason, I get Nine Inch Nails and Alice in Chains.
Very similar.
Um, I have no idea why it gets like crossed
Yeah,
in
the
my
names kind
mind,
of have
but
a similar feel to them.
yeah, that Nine Inch Nails was too dark for me. It was just,
Yeah,
just a little,
honestly, it scared me when I was young,
yeah,
but now as an adult, they've become one of my favorite bands. Just because I really respect Trent and his voice and his, his intention. He's just a
right.
very intentional person, and
Did you ever see that video of him in like the pop band? In
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like just all in black. That and
yeah.
there's like an old video of um Maynard from Tool. Like they were playing, I guess, sober, but it was like way
Hmm.
before they had formed Tool, and it's like almost this kind of like poppy-ish,
Oh
like
yeah,
really fast, right? And you're just like,
yeah.
whoa, the evolution of these
I
people in those
love seeing
songs.
that. Like, how did someone arrive to where they ended up? I always think
Yeah,
that's interesting.
that's I love. I mean, that's the crux of
Mhm.
what I love talking to people about. Like where part of the podcast is like where have you been, where where are you currently, and where are you going,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Like because everybody has a
Yeah, it's not a
narrative.
straight line either,
No,
It's,
hell no.
you kind of have to like, yeah, kind of have to pinball off of some things, to kind of find your sweet spot, I guess,
Yeah. So when
or
did you
what your
start?
voice is.
So when did you start getting like when did you pick up a guitar and then kind of move yourself more into kind of like
Mhm.
I guess how old were you when you guys kind of formed the
I think I want to say I started
dregs of Hopesfall?
pestering my mom for a guitar,
Mm-hmm.
when I was probably like 14, somewhere around there.
Do you remember what it
I
was?
Oh yeah, it was a Montana acoustic. It was a
Nice.
really cheap $150 acoustic guitar, but it was a guitar, So that's all that mattered to me at that point. And I started taking lessons at a local shop down the street. This guy named Keith, who was just I owe a lot to that guy actually. Like, he introduced me to like a lot of stuff that you know I was not really truly aware of, but
Yeah.
he really kind of pushed me down this rabbit hole of progressive music and like Rush and Yes, and even the later era Beatles stuff, which is really progressive and weird even. So I got a lot of my early Led Zeppelin, a lot of my early learnings were those bands, because he's like, if you're going to come in and learn from me, I'm going to teach you the stuff that I think is great.
Right.
I'm like, awesome, and it kind of opened up this whole new world of music that preceded me, which, inched its way in, and
Yeah.
I still listen to a lot of that stuff. I unabashedly love Rush, and will defend that band. And
Hey man,
yeah, so I
they're
think
awesome.
maybe some more of the progressive leanings of maybe some of the stuff that I wouldn't say we were truly progressive, any of the bands I've been in, but there is like elements of it. I think some of that seeps in from Keith, and
Yeah,
him
yeah, yeah.
teaching me those songs.
Yeah. I was gonna say, do you have an older brother or any siblings?
No, I'm the eldest in my family. It's just me
Okay.
and my sister, and she's about 2.5 years younger than me.
Because I can't tell you like how profound. I mean, granted, I have a good relationship with my brother, but like my brother's 4.5 years older than me. So
Oh yeah.
the stuff that he was bringing in, or just like, he's listening to Pumpkins, he's listening to Pearl Jam and Zeppelin and
Hmm.
Steely Dan and like all these
Love it.
different bands, right? That I just we came from a conservative Christian family too, so a
Hmm.
lot of it, I mean, not that my parents knew who these people were. They just, I don't know, were a little more conservative with their music. So it's
Same.
like, yeah, like I remember very specifically, like hiding Naughty by Nature's like CD
Yeah,
and playing
dude.
it and playing
Yeah,
it when they weren't
yeah,
around
you
and
don't want
stuff.
mom to find OPP, you know what I
Yeah, yeah.
mean? Like, that's, you don't want to explain it.
My mom was really clueless about a lot of things, and for some reason, my brother put the single of OPP on.
Mm-hmm.
And just like my mom just was like completely clueless. But there's this line in there, and for some reason they had it on. Like my brother somehow got her to put it on. And there's this line that says, "I did your partner because she's hot as a baker, not because I hate you because I'm naughty by nature." And I like was listening, and I was like, "I did your partner because she was hot as a baker." I'm like, I must be like 10. And like
Yeah.
I say it out loud, and my brother just kicks the back of my chair, and I'm like, "What?" Like,
yeah. Do not say it in front of mom.
Yeah, and like totally went over my mom's head. Like it's so yeah. So I, kind of back to like Keith and stuff. I feel like people need like there are these certain people, if you're lucky enough to have people in your life who kind of take an interest.
Oh
Or
yeah.
I think if you're like especially too if you're in a more conservative Christian family who kind of open up your eyes to like different ways of being, or just like
Mm-hmm.
different sounds, or tasting a little bit of like the forbidden fruit, something that's not like Carmen or DC
Oh
Talk
yeah,
or
man. Which yeah, I mean, I had a lot of that, kind of pushed across the table to me, and like this is what you should listen to. But it didn't resonate, and yeah, I feel very lucky to have had that time at that music store, and then I ended up working there part time in high school, and that was just an amazing experience to just work in a guitar store and talk to people. And one of the other guys that worked there, Andy, he was in his mid-20s at the time, and I thought he was so old and cool. And he introduced me to Jeff Buckley Grace, and that blew my mind. And so yeah, I was really lucky to kind of have some of those like people on the periphery that maybe weren't in my friend group, but were in my sphere, that like introduced me to things that maybe I wouldn't have stumbled upon. But once I got the bug,
right.
I couldn't stop. It was just like MTV all the time, 120 minutes all the time, Alternative Nation, and that was really informing me. And it's hard to explain that to the younger generation because they didn't know that time, but MTV was pivotal. It was just like they were just throwing all of these bands at you, and it was just constant, like, oh, I want to find the next thing, I want to find the next thing. And so yeah, I also credit MTV. And then like there were a couple of local record shops. Ernie's comes to mind, which they would stock a bunch of bootlegs, so I'd go over there and buy bootleg CDs when that was a big thing. And so I'd get all these rare, unheard live versions of Pumpkin songs that were never put to tape. And so I just started, I was like rabid, like
right,
at that stage of my life, it was just like input, more music, please. So yeah, it was just, and I think I don't want to take the credit, or I do feel like amongst my friend group, I was one of the ones that was like coming up and being like, hey, this new thing, like, and constantly wanting to intro bands to people. And I found the curation of that really fun, even as a teenager. So much so that I ended up working in a record store in college, and right out of college, post college, and loved that, talking bands and shop with people. So just kind of a nerd. Really,
so you find yourself in a high fidelity situation.
Yeah, just a music nerd, man.
And it sounds like, well, I'm curious about like what was that ravenousness? Like like if you could pinpoint something inside of yourself, what was it? Just youth? Was it,
that's a good question.
On something, or
I think kind of coming back to therapy, like I think in being in therapy for so long, I've really tried to explore the younger versions of myself, and like, who was that person and why was I attracted to these things? In a place of like forgiving my younger self and giving my younger self a little more grace,
Yeah.
But I think it's a couple things. I think I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable in in my own skin. I don't know what I attribute that to. I think maybe moving at a young age and like my life changing very drastically and going to a different state, and being an introvert too,
Yeah.
and being kind of a shy kid. Um, I think music just spoke to me because it was a way of expression that didn't use words, and it felt comfortable. I
Yeah.
don't know. It just felt like, oh, you can express yourself and your emotions without speaking. And I found that to be extremely powerful and resonant, within me. And I think as a kid that kind of didn't fit in, I wasn't like the outcast or any of that,
Right.
but I didn't run with the cool kids, and you know, there was a bit of just identity issues, I guess, and I think I dove into music because it gave me an identity, and it spoke to me, and it made me feel less alone in the world,
Yeah.
and
I see.
it
I
also
think that's really interesting. Just not to cut you off, but like I've had conversation. I have conversations like this all the time with you know a, I think a lot of people my age because I see a lot of teenagers. I see a lot of where
Mhm.
identity, where the things that we would grasp or cling on to when we were younger. Like for me, it was music, right? And
Mhm.
for some people, it's being a sports player, or like there's an identity you need to hang your hat on something,
Yeah,
right? When you're younger, where you're
yeah.
just kind of like, I need something that I can relate to that makes me feel like I'm part of something,
Hmm.
right?
You need a
And
tribe.
yeah,
Hmm.
and like I was an emotional kid. Like that's just, who I was.
Me too, man.
And that was constantly trying to think about like what my place was as a
Hmm.
guy versus and like harnessing my own emotions and trying to figure those out and
I
you know
completely relate.
and so I had this very specific moment in mind. Like for me, one of the biggest the seminal moments in some of my like listening is just there were songs that just touched something inside of me that I was
Hmm.
like, I don't know, like it expresses a longing or an angst that like I just connect with, that I want more of this, and
Hmm.
I don't even know how to like.
No, it's that, not to jump in, but
Yeah.
I've always described it as like that hopeful melancholy. It's like
Yeah.
this acknowledgement of the pain and the sadness and all of these things that exist in the human experience, but finding a way through that to find that shred of hope that we all need and cling to get through our days, And I
Yeah.
think striking that balance musically, those are the bands that generally I've always been drawn to, where it's like a tragic optimism,
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's not fatalism, right? It's not
Right.
nihilism. I think that's why I can never really get into at least some versions of metal just never appealed to me because it just felt so nihilistic. And
Right.
um anyway, yeah, I mean, sounds like you were a sensitive kid like me. I was very sensitive and still am. And that's just something I'm kind of coming around to in middle age and being okay and admitting that and accepting it.
Yeah.
I think there's a real, at least in my own journey and exploration of who am I, that there's been kind of a circling back around to the sensitivity that maybe I suppressed or hid from people, maybe through my 20s when I was trying to prove myself, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and
I,
I think, Lance, who I played in Celebrity with and playing in parallel with, where he's a very sensitive individual. And I think that's why we bonded with one another very quickly. But um, we always talk about the artist brain. I think in order to be a channel and a vessel, and I don't want to get too metaphysical about it, but like you
okay.
have to be open to like being able to tap into those like uncomfortable
Yeah.
parts of existence, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a
heartbreak, trauma,
huge,
whatever it might be.
well, I was like the band that opened up a lot for me was just the Counting Crows. My brother
Oh, dude,
listened a lot.
August and
So,
everything after is people forget, if you come to the band now, it's easy to forget what they
oh,
were.
yeah.
And that record blew my mind. I was like,
Yeah.
wait, a dude is singing about this stuff?
Right.
And like,
Right. Well,
um,
one of the first things that I ever, I actually never, this is a funny story because the first stuff that I listened to, I was always in the back of my brother's car, or I remember like we were driving down to Virginia on vacation, so I had like stuff on my Walkman or whatever,
oh yeah,
like kind of
yeah,
listening to, and they had a double disc live album that was called Across a Wire, and it
I
was
remember it.
yeah, so it was the VH1 Storytellers that they did,
Yeah,
and
I
then
watched that one, dude. I remember
yeah,
that.
and so I remember the first time hearing Around Here, but
Oh
it was the
man,
live version, and his performance, like he goes off into all these different, like his performances were otherworldly.
oh
You're
yeah.
like, where's it?
Where's he going?
Yeah, where's he going with it? And so I learned all the melodies from the live album. And so I knew the melodies only through that. And then I would throw on like Recovering the Satellites or August and everything
Hmm.
after. And just be like, wait a minute, like be singing along and then just realize I didn't know the actual album. But that's what I loved that so much.
Oh man,
Like,
yeah. Dude, those first few records are really, really phenomenal. And I feel like, the historical lens has maybe not given them the credit that maybe they were due,
yeah.
you know.
There's a
I feel like
great
they
podcast that I listened to that it's called like they just dissect albums and they did and bands and they did something on the Counting Crows and
it's because
it was
everyone
just like
thinks of like the Shrek song now,
right,
It's like that's
right,
what they
yeah,
associate with Counting Crows. It's like, well, I get why you think, it's kind of how
right,
I feel about later era Weezer, It's
right,
like it'd be easy to come to it in their later age and forget how
right,
rad they were.
exactly, yeah. And they still can belt out. I saw them like a few years ago with like Matchbox 20, I
Oh yeah.
think. But that was the thing is like I saw it and I was just like, I don't even know half these songs. Like,
Yeah.
bring me back. I think like the first big concert my brother brought me to was a Counting Crows and Live.
Oh yeah. I
Um,
like that Throwing Copper record a ton.
yeah. Which was just I mean, it was the coolest thing for me. I was
Oh
like a
yeah.
15-year-old kid, like with my
For
brother,
sure,
like
dude.
you're like hanging with
It
my
doesn't get
brother and
cooler
his
than
friends.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like going to your first shows, man. I mean, that's life-changing stuff, man.
Right. And to go from that, and then I had all these friends, and this is kind of like a interesting transition that we're listening to like Slipknot and heavy stuff and
Mm-hmm.
finding this kind of like aggression inside of me. And that was kind of my precursor to getting into more like post-hardcore
And hardcore and
and yeah, and
punk
all that
rock and yeah.
and all that stuff. And so like each thing brought out a different emotional connection.
Oh yeah.
And so like when I mean, Frailty of Words is a very hard, chaotic record in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Um, like how did you? Well, first of all, how'd the band start?
Oh, the band started, I was a freshman in college. I went to a school in Burlington, North Carolina called Elon University. Not related to Elon Musk. Preceded that guy.
Yeah,
Anyway, yeah, so we all grew up in church together. That's how we knew one another, youth group kids.
yeah,
We were the oddballs. That's how I describe us. We were the ones that like the youth pastor didn't know what to do with.
right.
We'd show up to church and band t-shirts, and anyway, like we formed a shared bond, and then it was just like, like I was saying earlier, we were just trading music with each other. And we had an older friend named Chris Kincaid, who was the first bassist,
Mm-hmm.
who was on Frailty. And he started to get into subgenres of music, and he found Crank and Deep Elm and um drawing a blank, like the first few Promise Ring records, Jade Tree Records, that's who
Yeah.
it was. And he just started buying stuff like sight unseen, never having heard it. And so we started finding a lot of like, early, I guess I'd say the Midwest emo stuff, which just really spoke to me in particular. And yeah, so that was kind of the genesis of like finding not just alternative rock, but wait, there's even these deeper subgenres. And, obviously Tooth and Nail was huge for us, Solid State.
Where
Finding,
was Solid State in that? 'Cause like my obviously early introduction was MXPX. Like that was,
I think that was a lot of people's intro. I think my intro to seeing that there was spiritual bands that were playing music that was really interesting and groundbreaking and pushing boundaries. I used to go to this family Christian store, and there was this girl that worked there named Julie T, and I could tell that she was punk, because back then the way you dressed kind of informed everything. Now the monoculture, everybody kind of like might be into punk, even though they're not, But back then, if you dressed a certain way, it's like, well, that person's into what I'm into. So I started talking to her, and she started recommending these bands, Starflyer 59 being an early one. The Gold and Silver Records kind of blew my mind. Plank Eye was another one.
Yeah.
Poraloo, which ended up being one of my favorites.
Awesome.
I guess I'd say if you're counting Christian bands, but so yeah, that was a huge entry point. And I had a friend, well, not a friend, but in high school, there was a couple of guys that I could tell were into punk rock and hardcore. And I was kind of intrigued by it,
Yeah.
I didn't fully understand the music. And one day in algebra class, this guy, Evan, he'd wear a Minor Threat t-shirt. I felt like every day to class. And he's like, hey man, you like heavy music, right? And I was like, because I like Rage Against the Machine and Helmet and all of that. And I was starting to kind of venture into that kind of lane, so to speak.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I like Rage and stuff like that. And he's like, well, hey, you should come to this show, I'm like, all right, he hands me a flyer and we go, and it's like at a community rec center or something. And I was just like, what is this? Like,
yeah.
I was just like intrigued. I was like, these guys are playing a show that they set up. There's people here. This probably would have been 95 or 96, somewhere around there. And yeah, that was kind of my entry point into hardcore. And then, going back to the record store, and like, I think the first one I found was maybe Overcome, Blessed Are the Persecuted. And I was just like, this dude's voice is just the angriest thing I've ever heard, you know? And at first I was like, I didn't get it, but I wanted to get it. It was one of those situations where you're like, I'm intrigued and I want to keep listening to this, but I don't know why. And, then
that's what the Satellite Years was for me.
That's very cool, man.
It was one of those things where, I'd kind of been introduced to just, some Victory bands taking back.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of people's path was Victory,
Yeah. And I just remember like I was going to ORU, which is Oral Roberts University.
Yeah, I know it.
Oklahoma. I went there for 2 years, but we kind of found a group of like scene guys. That's all we did was just go to shows, and like that's the first time I saw Hopesfall but I remember my friend Matt was just driving and he had a ton of different CDs. He had Rival Schools and Jimmy Eat World and Clarity and, like stuff like that. And he popped in a band and I was like, this is like, I don't like screaming vocals for the most part, but there was something about it that I was like, this is like just the right touch for me. Like this is of like melody and aggressiveness, and it just grabbed me for some reason. And I was like, who is this? And my friend was like, oh, it's this band Hopesfall. And that was my introduction to the Satellite Years. That's
so cool, man.
And that was that was my gateway into a lot of harder things. Like,
which makes sense. And I totally forgot and didn't answer your original question about Frailty and how chaotic it was. But I think we were figuring ourselves out on that first record. You know, we were figuring out how to write a song, first of all. What we are, what is our voice? What, you know, what's our thing, right?
Right.
You know, and I think you hear us figuring that out on that record, you know. And I think that probably attributes to some of the chaos of it. And also, you know, we were listening to a lot of like Training for Utopia and, you know, Coalesce and like some of these more chaotic bands, which I think earlier on, that was, I don't want to say it just kind of piqued our interest, but, you know,
there was this old video I saw of you guys at Cornerstone. And I think you start off with, I think it's called Lament. Is that the instrumental?
That's right.
And then it like hard transition, and you guys are just like in it, like it's such an interesting transition. I've seen some old videos of Chris on bass and stuff like that, and that guy went hard.
Oh, he went really hard. I mean, he went super hard. Yeah, man, I don't know what to attribute that to other than just like youthful energy and you know, I always enjoy lulling the audience like right out of the gate. I don't know why. Like I would go see all these hardcore bands and like they would just like stack like their most brutal, you know, breakdown up front. And I was just like, you know, like that's cool. But like, what if we thought about this differently and started with something beautiful and like kind of set the tone? And then to me in my own mind, and I could be totally off, but like setting that kind of serenity at the front. When you left the serenity and then went into the chaos, it was that much more jarring, you know. And that's what I wanted, and what we wanted to do was like, I always wanted to catch the audience off guard, and not from a place of like being a contrarian or any of that, just like, how can we think about this genre of music in a way that maybe, you know, some of the beat down bands or mosh bands aren't doing, you know? Because I knew that wasn't me. I'm not like, that's not what I'm drawn to. And I'm not bagging those types of bands. I mean, there's a lot of great mosh bands, but I just knew that wasn't us, you know? And I think we all knew that. So it was like, let's lean into this kind of other thing that we know we can do. And I do think it lent itself to maybe catching the audience off guard a little bit. And that was the intended result, you know?
Yeah. Well, when I think about, you know, I think that for me, at least, that's part of what drew me in, was the like beautiful guitar parts, and then mixed in with some of this, like it encompassed a lot of different emotions at one point, right? Like for I don't know what intention is, and there's a whole nother, you know, dialogue you can have about like artist intent versus you know, what's received and interpreted and all that stuff.
It's not up to the artist. You know, how you receive it is how you receive it.
Right.
All I can do is, you know, and all the band can do is kind of put the energy that we wanted into it and hope that maybe a fraction of it resonated, whether that's the pretty stuff or the heavy stuff or whatever, you know.
Well, I think it's watching when I went to Furnace Fest in 21, like, which I was, you know, that was an amazing experience, but
I'm sad I missed it.
It was a difficult time in general. But there's a
same for me.
Yeah, there's a part, you know, is it April Left with Silence, that just kind of has that instrumental, the I pray you find, that's April Left with Silence, or is that End of an Era?
End of an Era.
Okay, that part I just remember, and like when it gets to that part, like Jay was just kind of sitting there, just like looking over the crowd, and it was just this really weird, not weird, like it was just a surreal, like beautiful experience that everybody in the crowd you could feel, right?
Mhm.
And just uh, the instrumental parts and that you guys had, and even what was the dude? I feel like an idiot now because
It's
I'm
okay.
forgetting
It's okay, man.
everything.
I'm not
Hall of the
judgment.
Sky. Sorry,
Yeah.
Hall of the Sky.
I can't
Right.
remember half of the song titles
There's
myself
these like
sometimes.
there's these like breathing parts, that happen, and
Yeah.
it just allows the music to kind of capture people, right? And
Yeah.
you could tell the people who were into like the much older stuff, and then I have been into the whole catalog for a really long time, but just kind of, I don't know, the kind of like, for lack of a better word, like Selah, say the rest, the pause, where you're able just to kind of like sit and experience.
Yeah.
It's like,
I call it like the trance effect, right?
yeah,
Like I- I'm always drawn to that. And even as a player, like those are my favorite parts of the songs to play. Like, you know, it's not the riffs for me, even though those can be fun.
yeah,
It's I wait for those
right,
for those trance like parts, and that's what it is to me. And it's a meditation in a way,
yeah,
for myself. I'm only speaking personally. I can't speak for all the guys, but like, you know, that section of Invenera is meditative
yeah,
to play it. And it's like a balm or something. I don't know,
right,
man. It's
right,
like it calms me down, and it centers my thoughts, and quiets my mind. And I think that's what I'm always trying to find that, because I don't have a quiet mind.
right, yeah,
My
yeah,
mind is like very busy, and I'm an overthinker, so finding those moments for me is powerful. And
right.
it means a lot to me to hear that maybe other people tap into that or pick up on it,
Oh, it is. I
you
think it's
know?
what makes what's the beauty of these interviews that I get to do is like sometimes there's just self discovery within myself of
Yeah.
like, oh, that's it. That's what it is. It for me. What draws me is that meditative, contemplative part that
Yeah.
like is sets because you can have hard and you can have fast and you can have
And that's
chaos. Like
fun.
I
That's all
just,
fun.
yeah, but at the same time, I was always trying to pinpoint like why does this music in general just like speak to me? It's not just the ethereal stuff, it's the breathing. And
Yeah.
like when I found that when I was in college, like it just hit differently in a
Hmm.
way. And I was like, wow, what a mix of like the duality of how I feel. And
Yeah, man,
where like,
that's
Doug
powerful.
like Doug's screaming and I'm like, this is the aggression part, like for myself, and then just meditate and just appreciating that other side of me that's like, I'm also a Counting Crows fan. So like,
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
letting that breathe. And
I think that's, I mean, speaking, you know, from my own perspective, I think I can't do heavy all the time, man.
yeah,
It's just not me. And it's I love a lot of bands that are just strictly heavy, right? Like
yeah,
they just pummel you. And but those aren't the records that like I'm gonna go back to again and again. Like I'll go back to it when I need that fix, right?
yeah,
That fix of I'm having a tough day or I want to work out or whatever it might be, something to amp me up. But generally, most of my favorite records have ebbs and flows. It's
yeah,
like different emotions, different things coming to the surface. Because I think it more broadly reflects the human experience. I can't be angry all the time, you know.
Right.
I certainly deal with anger issues for sure, you know. But I don't want to live in that all the time. I want to find rest, and
Yeah.
sometimes those quiet moments are rest, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of going back, I think, because I went to a theological seminary, and that was a psychology school too. So it was
Mhm.
it's kind of a dual punch, but like,
Yeah, that's a
just
lot. It's a
yeah,
lot to unpack.
a lot of deconstruction, a lot of
Yeah.
reconstruction, a lot of
Yes.
like all that stuff,
Yeah.
Um, but it's the concept of Sabbath, of just like not doing anything and
Yeah.
and just resting and
Yeah.
contemplation, and it's neat. Like Sabbath is an incredibly beautiful concept that
It is. And
in practice is awesome.
it's one of those things too that is undervalued, you know.
Yeah.
We're so obsessed with busyness and productivity and all of these things, you know. But yeah.
I'm curious, just really quickly, like, I mean, we could talk all day about what Hopesfall was,
Yeah.
and just like the impact that it had. But, I've listened to other podcasts that I think I listened to the Label podcast that you were on, and every band has a story, and
Mhm.
like that in bands are such a hard thing. They really are. To
Oh, it's
be
super hard.
to be in a situation where you take, 4 or 5 people and try and get them on the same page. Holy moly. Like,
Mm.
it's difficult to do that with people that, your own family, right?
Oh yeah. Certainly.
So to
Certainly.
do it with like conflicting ideas like that, I don't know. What was that time of life like for you? You have
It
end of an
was
era,
it
satellite
was
years.
I mean, my time period in the band was roughly 4.5 to 5 years. Like if you're counting the initial run, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was a young person. So it was just, you know, I, I'm not. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that we lived and breathed it. It's all we cared about.
Yeah.
It was literally all I cared about, and all the energy went into it, and we were rehearsing 3, 4, 5 days a week, for hours, like hours of time. Like we would go up there on like a Sunday and practice from like 1 until 5. It was
Yeah.
just sheer insanity when I think back on it. But that's what you do when you're young and you have an idea and you want to express it. I really think that's kind of that was the energy. We had ideas and we wanted to express them. That was it. It was just like I didn't even care. It was like I don't care if I make money doing this. Like
Right.
I have this thing and I need to get it out and I need to put it into the universe. And so it was just like it was obsession, man.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can, like, my whole identity was wrapped up in it at that time in my life, for better and for worse. It was both a good thing and a terrible thing, if I'm being honest.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
As a
Yeah.
young man who didn't really know himself. I'm still am.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just the group of us was just it was like this is it. This is what we're doing. And that was that. There was
Right.
no like, until it wasn't, and
Right.
and then I spun out, but yeah, I just remember that was it. That was my life. And I was going to college at the same time, and certainly I was wanting to make good grades and do all of that and have a degree, but the focus was the band.
Right.
And um that initial run was just intense.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. It seems like it. I mean, like
Intense
the
and beautiful and like
yeah.
and sad, and like it's just like how we're talking about how songs ebb and flow. That was the experience in the band as well, you know.
Yeah.
Changing members and figuring that out, and you know, continuing to evolve stylistically, and like wanting to challenge ourselves and not repeat ourselves, and how do we keep pushing this envelope, you know. um we were just making stuff that excited us, to be
Right.
honest. It's like, do you think this is exciting? Cool, okay, I do too, let's keep
Yeah.
going, you know.
Yeah. And it
That
seems
was
like it was a special time and place too.
yeah,
It feels like what happened during those years. I don't know how much that could be replicated.
it can't. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
time, like you can't go back and recreate what was, man. And anyone that thinks they can is lying to themselves. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not from a place of like you can't rekindle or um, redefine or rediscover, but you can't be who you were then. And
Right.
um, you know, who I was then was not dissimilar from who I am now. I just have more life experience now to be able
Yeah.
to look back and handle things more maturely, you know, than I did. And
I was talking to a friend yesterday. He for the podcast, his name is Joe, and he was in a band called Edison Glass. And
yeah,
they were my friends for Joe. Joe actually lives in Tennessee. His name is Joe Moore, and
I'm familiar with the band.
yeah, they were my college buddies. Like growing up,
Very
like
cool.
I roomed with them and all that stuff. But like
Very cool.
he said something to the effect of looking back, like, and I was like, this is a really good therapy line. Like we were who we needed to become,
Hmm.
like in those times, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
And so like when you're looking back on mistakes or things like that, it's out of, and especially at that age, it's out of survival. And especially if you're touring and doing all these things, like you're surviving, you know, for the most part. And it's like a fun survival because you could do that. But when you're 40, you can't do
No,
that, you know? And
no.
like, I also just don't like, I don't see that type of organic scene, I guess. Like when I was saying like recreate it, like I don't know. I mean, you live in Nashville.
Yeah, I'm in
So the
Nashville
music
now.
scene,
Yeah, I've been here
yeah.
20 years.
I
Yeah.
mean the music scene's huge, obviously,
Oh, it's yeah.
you know, but
Yeah, you're
like
surrounded by people that can outplay you here for sure.
there's something there was something that just felt really organic about what was going on in terms of like shows being put on or just, you know,
It was
different
very
record labels.
grassroots.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that there's different grassroots now, I'm assuming. But I mean, was I mean, there's so much I could ask you, Ryan, and I like to try and toe the line between like past and present, but
No,
like
dude, I'm whatever you got, I'm happy to answer,
I
man.
guess
No
like
matter
did
how surface level or how deep you want to go, you know?
well just did you realize look, I mean, there's you and then there's younger you. Like, did you realize that people would still be listening to this stuff? People would still be impacted.
No.
Like, how do you think about that
100%
as
no
it's going on versus, you know, as a wiser, like looking back
it blows my
on
mind. I
things?
mean,
Yeah.
like no joke, we had a text thread last week when Satellite Years 2.0 went up, you know, and we're all on the thread together, you know, and we were just blown away, you know. Every last one of us was just like, I don't understand, you know, and I still don't understand, you know, the fact that you want to talk to me or that anybody wants to talk to me. You know, it's one of those things that I still don't grasp, you know, because, you know, and I'm not like, I am just a normal dude, you know,
Yeah.
like I'm not special. I'm not like, I just made this thing. We made this thing, you know, and,
Yeah.
it resonated for some reason, and I don't even truly know why, you know.
For the same
But
reason.
but it's beautiful, you know. It's one of those things that I'm like, I'm grateful, you
Yeah.
know, like I'm grateful that people care, you know, at all. That I made something and then someone sits down with it and digests it and it informs something for them, like that. That's what I always like. I think back to young me listening to my favorite records, and like just being obsessive, like just every detail I wanted to understand and comprehend. And like, you know, as a music fan and as a music nerd, like I obsess over those things,
Right.
and
Yeah.
to know that someone else out there is doing the same thing with something that I created, it's mind blowing to me. Like, because
That vinyl sold out so freaking fast was ridiculous.
it was
I'm
just,
lucky my friend was at Furnace Fest because
dude,
that was
like
nuts.
it was nuts. And it just, for me, I'm just speaking personally, not for everybody. It, it it was redemptive for me last week. And what I mean by that is like there was a lot of turmoil in the band when we made that record.
Yeah.
And I think and I exited in a way that was not great. Okay. And there was an emotional fallout from that experience that lasted a long time.
Yeah.
For me. I mean, that's one of the things that pushed me to therapy, if I'm being 100% honest, was that experience. And feeling unmoored after that. Like, so to see that last week, it was redemptive. It was like it kind of took some of those rough edges, that I had for the satellite years, and it kind of sanded them down. And it's like, that's powerful for me 20 years later, 21 years later, to be able to be like, oh, wow. It feels good. It feels good, but also it's deeper than feeling good for me. It was healing in a way.
Yeah. And I've heard Adam talk before just about here's the thing. I was a little hesitant to listen to it.
Mm-hmm. I understand why.
And I was like, there's sometimes when bands go touring and things like that like I've had the fortune of like, being a part of seeing so many bands that got so big, and being able to just have that experience to, like seeing Coheed and Cambria in a small club, or before things like it, just like these intimate moments that I want to remember, that I don't want to try and recreate again.
Yep.
That I'm like, look, if I went and saw them, it would be in a totally different experience. And I just kind of want to like encapsulate like that in my head as the experience that I had.
I get it.
But I also knew that because when the Arbiter album came out, I corresponded.
Great record.
Corresponded pretty heavily with Adam, because I was doing a whole, like, I made a beer for the thing and like all that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which was amazing. And to just knowing that mix, it was not satisfactory, for a lot of the band, or like how it kind of turned out, and in his own words. So to have like a redemptive, even like, we're going to try and do this some justice, like the way we kind of wanted it to be. And there's a time and place for both albums, right?
Sure.
Like there's things that I hear that are coming, like some of the more acoustic guitar parts, like amazing. You know what I mean? Like, and it does justice, but there was a hesitation of like,
I get it.
I don't know. So my question is like, were you hesitant about that process?
No, not at all. I think I approached the process with the idea that I only wanted to do it if we could honor the record.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is honor what it was, but also honor what it should have been.
Yeah.
And um I and I'm like, if fans like the first version better, I get it. I get it. But I hated that record. Like,
Yeah.
hated it. Like, so much so that I could not listen to it. Like, I'll never forget the first time I listened to it, and I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I like I can't express how much I disliked it. Like, it felt like a total, I'm just speaking candidly.
Yeah.
From my perspective, it felt like a total failure of everything that we wanted to do with it. And what I mean by that is the intention of what we put to tape was true.
Right.
Okay. All of that was true. It was all lost in the mix.
Right.
It wasn't our intention while we were tracking it. All of that was great.
Right.
The sounds we were getting to tape were good. It was the mix, and the mix just was so murky and muddy, and there was no separation in the instruments, and it just felt messy. And so when this opportunity presented itself, I was like, yeah, well, yeah, let's do it, like, because I want to hear what we had wanted it to sound like. And I do believe that 2.0 sounds the way we would have wanted it to sound in 2002.
Yeah.
Through the lens of maturity, through the lens of knowing what we're doing now, because we were green, man. Like, we didn't know how to express, like, hey, I need like the EQ, like 1K EQ dialed back, or all these things. We were just kids, like, going for it. So, as I've aged, I've learned a thing or two about audio and how to express it in a way that makes sense to a mix engineer. So, yeah, I feel
that's my question. Was there no, like, when you got the mix back, were you just like, was there any pushback on it?
I don't know, but I don't know how that process played out, because I was out of the band at that point. So we had tracked the record.
Oh, that's even worse then.
We tracked the record, for 2.5 or 3 weeks, I want to say, in Illinois, with Matt from Hum.
Yeah.
And we had a week off after tracking. And then my recollection was we were going to go back to Chicago to finish mixing with Keith Cleversley, who mixed You'd Prefer an Astronaut, which is one of my favorite records of all time. Anyway, in between, on that break, is when they asked me to leave the band. So I didn't get to participate in the mix. So that was a sore spot, if I'm being 100% honest. It's water under the bridge now.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm in good graces with everybody. We love one another. It's a brotherhood at this point. But, at the time, things were very not on good terms. And so, yeah, they mixed the record. I wasn't there. I wouldn't have been able to correct the failures of that mix. But the fact that I didn't get to have input, that hurt a little bit, know? And I think that colored my listening experience with the record for many years. I don't know if they had pushback. My assumption would be, and Josh or Adam could speak to this better than me, my assumption would be we just ran out of money. And it was like, this is the mix, The label was probably like, and this is me assuming, but knowing how those things go back then, it was probably like, hey, the money's gone. So
right. There's nothing we can do about this.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do about it. So, we all just kind of lived with it. And strangely, the record had legs, even despite all of that, which speaks to the material, I think, that people could see past that, and see the heart of the song, and the heart of the record,
Right.
Which is amazing.
It feels like, if I was to put myself in your shoes, which I don't know anything around the surrounding of you leaving, but being asked to leave versus it being a mutual decision or any of those things, like, you're what, to take something that you've cultured and made in a collaborative effort, but also like this is your child, right? Like in a
Yeah.
certain sense, this is something that you've put so much time and energy,
For sure.
and then to have that representation. But it seems like it would, if I was in your shoes, I would have felt like so much was robbed, right? Like in that process, not getting to have any say, or in some of this stuff. And so I could see how that would add an extra level of like,
Yeah, complexity. I mean,
yeah,
I can't unentangle the emotions from that period of my life
yeah,
away from it, even though I've worked through most of it,
yeah,
and I've made peace with it. I still, it still brings up those emotions, and like, to be 100% candid, the day it dropped on streaming, I had listened to it as we were providing notes for 2.0 and all of that. So I knew what was coming, but to have it official, I put it on, I got to work early, put my headphones in, and nobody was there because I'm usually one of the first people into the office because I have young kids, so I'm up
yeah,
all the time.
yeah,
So I put it on. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna like sit. I'm just gonna sit and listen. And I mean, I got emotional, man. Like, I mean, the end of Only the Clouds, like it made me cry.
yeah,
I mean, it really did, because it was like, you know, 21 years of life that is just snapped,
yeah,
and it was both a reminder of my love for those guys, but it was also a reminder of like who I've become,
yeah.
and it was just extremely powerful, and I hope the fans hear that, and I hope they give it a chance, because it moved me, and I felt unmovable for so long around that record,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I don't know if that answers kind of your
No, so
question, but
that's a really beautiful thing. I think there's, to be a fan versus to be a part of the experience, it's two separate experiences,
yeah,
and like the emotionality or what you're putting into to the music, or the intent, like all those things matter heavily in the
yeah.
process, and like,
I will say, I mean, kind of circle back to like you talking about being robbed. I don't. I know what you're saying there. I don't know if I would describe it in that way. I
mhm,
think I would describe it in the sense that you're leaving something unfinished.
yeah,
And for someone like me who is wired to be a perfectionist and is highly self-critical, I'm my own worst critic in many ways. You know, I think it just always felt unfinished to me, and
mm,
I hate that feeling of
yeah,
like leaving something not done or not complete, you know. Um, yeah, and it altered the course of my life, I mean, that moment in time, April or May of 2002, whenever that happened, somewhere in there. It was the spring. That's all I really remember. But
yeah. I was gonna
it
ask.
altered the course of my life. I mean, my life changed after that dramatically. I moved to Nashville, and I met my wife, and um, joined another band, and
I remember. So that's I saw Celebrity. I saw you on tour with Hopesfall. Is what I
where was
remember.
that?
This was
You remember?
where I think it was somewhere in Oklahoma.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Whatever.
So
It was you,
Matt
Juliana Theory, and I think it was Juliana Theory, either that or Copeland and
Copeland was
Hopesfall.
on one of those legs. Yeah, the Fine brothers, the drummer and bass player and Celebrity are Oklahoma natives. They grew up in
Okay.
Oklahoma City. So we played there all the time because we had a solid fan base there because of them. So we always had good shows there.
So I was just thinking about like, what were you on good enough terms at that point? Because they were touring Satellite Years.
Yeah, we toured with Hopesfall.
Toured with Hopesfall. What that was like, you know, if there was emotion.
I mean, I'll be 100% honest. It was extremely difficult.
Yeah.
You know, because we were not on good terms. I mean, we were not ignoring one another, you know, hey, what's up? You know, that kind of thing. But it was hard. I'd say what was hardest about it is like being the opening band, you know, on that bill.
Yeah.
And like people filing in, you know, to see your band, and they're, you know, half interested.
Yeah.
Because they didn't come to see, you know, your band. They came to see Juliana Theory or Hopesfall.
Right.
It was very humbling. I'll say that.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, what I remember from that show is at some point, my friend turned to me and said, I think the singer from Hopesfall just threw up behind the stage. That was like the memorable part of the show.
Oh yeah. I mean, dude, the band went hard back then. I mean, Brigham used to throw up a lot, like after shows, like just because the headbanging was just so crazy. But like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't all bad though. I mean, I loved touring in Celebrity. It was like,
well, that makes me question, like, if it was an uncomfortable thing,
yeah,
why would you tour together?
You know, the machine, you know, the music industry, you know, our manager managed Juliana Theory. So the manager of Celebrity managed Juliana Theory. And he's like, hey, they're going out. You guys should open. It seems like somewhat of a fit, you know,
sure.
Even though I would probably debate that, but
yeah.
You know, and it just so happened that Hopesfall is support, you know, and it's like, well, am I going to turn down this opportunity? Like, is my ego that big? It wasn't at the time, you know, and I think I was so interested in doing something new and striking out and finding another voice for myself that I was willing to take the ego hit of watching my old band every night.
Yeah.
And, you know, watching their merch table have a long line, you know, and, you know, it sounds petty as hell, but, you know, it's like,
that's the thing.
A lot of people didn't even know that I was the guy that helped write that record, you know? Right. So you know, it was a good lesson in, ego check but it also pushed me to become a better performer and a better guitar player. And I mean this 100%. It's not that I wasn't upset about the way those things played out, but I was fully devoted to Celebrity at that point. I mean, that's where I wanted to be. That was the band that I wanted to be in. And in some ways, and this is not a slight to Hopesfall, it was just a more natural fit for my style of playing, you know? Left to my own devices, I play guitar more like Celebrity than I do Hopesfall, you know? And what I mean by that is like genre of music. Like,
okay,
if I'm going to put a record on, you know, I'm going to put on Teenage Wrist, you know?
Right.
I'm not going to put on like whatever the new heavy thing is. I'm going to put on like an alternative rock-oriented type of album. So, you know, kind of sliding into Celebrity, it was just a really natural progression for me. And I really just wanted to make that band the best it can be, you know?
Yeah. What'd you guys, you had 2 full lengths, right?
Yeah, we did Lovesick, which is the record I joined on. It was about halfway recorded when I moved to Nashville. Great record, you know.
I was listening to it today, and one of them, I was like, there was like a Dishwalla vibe.
Oh yeah, there's certainly some Dishwalla in there, and you know, I love that type of stuff. But yeah, so I came in on that. I played a few songs on that record, and then we did Mining for Twilight afterwards, which is an extremely dark record. It's a divorce record. that's what Lance was going through at the time. So you can definitely hear it. And I was a writer on that record. They really welcomed me into the band. It was very they're like, dude, we want you to contribute, you know.
Yeah.
And I was excited to flex some of those muscles that maybe I didn't get to flex as much in Hopesfall, which is more ambience and vibe versus
You definitely tell that on the records.
riff, you know, based rock, which I love that too. So yeah, they kind of gave me carte blanche. We're like, dude, do you like whatever you do that. And we
You're
just
like, oh, the reverb pedals.
yeah, and dude, and honestly, that was so fun for me to like focus on effects and think about playing off the vocal versus playing a riff, and like it made me a more nuanced player being in that band, and helped me think differently about songs, you know.
And did that roll over? I mean, is Celebrity is in parallel? Definitely has.
It's 3/4. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it's incestuous, you know. In parallel is 3/4 of Celebrity, so it's Celebrity minus the drummer, and honestly, it's kind of Celebrity 2.0 in a way, because our drummer in parallel was the producer for Celebrity, so there was already a natural kinship there musically. So that, you know, when Matt, our original drummer in Celebrity, decided he was going to hang it up, and he owns a bunch of salons now, and that's kind of his gig. You know, we were like, well, Mark, you're the next natural fit. And when we started in parallel, it was just kind of it was a 3-piece at first, just me, Jesse, and Lance, and then Mark on the record that came out in 2020, Fashioner. Mark was like, I want to be a full member. And we're like, come on, let's do it.
I was gonna ask, like, kind of going back a little bit to Redemption. Was there any redemption in your 2011 like reunion?
Totally. Oh yeah,
Doug?
absolutely, absolutely. That was different. Live and recording are different beasts to me, and
sure,
to perform with the band live again certainly was healing. Absolutely. You know, to see the fans, to talk to the fans, which was always one of my favorite things to do. You know, just hearing people's stories. I'm endlessly fascinated by people, and yeah, that was a beautiful experience, man. Had a blast doing it.
It was nice to see Doug. I mean,
dude,
I don't think anybody had seen him in a really long time.
Yeah, to be with Doug again was wonderful. To be with Pat, you know, I hadn't seen Pat in a long time. Yeah, and the shows were great. They were fun and well attended, and we got to do them with our friends, you know, like to play shows with Harvard and Code 7. I mean, come on, you know, it's like that North Carolina bond, you know, is special. So yeah, I loved it. I had a blast.
Did you have any interest in playing any of the shows that the guys were doing for the Satellite Years, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not a question of desire, right?
Logistics.
It's a question of logistics for me. I'm the only member not in North Carolina.
Yeah.
So it's about, you know, before kids, a 7-hour drive; after kids, you know, an 8.5-hour drive.
Right.
So,
and it's a totally different ballgame. I mean, I know that you're the only one who has younger kids at this point.
Jay has younger kids.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Jay is about to have his third any day now. So Jay and I's kids are right in the same age bracket.
Yeah. Totally that.
You know, Jay was in Chicago for many years, and he ended up moving back to North Carolina. So he's back in town. So it makes it much more palatable and easy for him to show up for rehearsal. You know, for me, there's just a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through to make it happen. Totally. So that's really the reason, you know, it's not from a lack of wanting. It's, you know, logistics and timing. It's, you know, and, you know, we're you know, this, like PTO, and like, how much time do I have off for my job? And like, how much of that do I use with my family, which is the most important thing to me, or my girls. Right. And, you know, so it's adult stuff, man. You know, it's like, I would love to be up there, playing. I just haven't been able to fit it in,
Yeah.
without sacrificing large chunks with my family. And right now, you know, that's what has taken precedence, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
I've got
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
young girls, and you know what that entails.
Yeah.
It's constant. And
Do you
I
get
want
hit as much as I do with my boys and wrestling?
my first daughter Remy is extremely physical.
Okay.
Extremely physical. Like, she wants to be climbing on you at all times.
You ever have
Glory
those
will
moments where you're just like, get off of me?
all the time. Dude, I'm touched out like by noon every day. I'm touched out, but it's part of the gig,
Totally.
and I don't want to. It's not, I want to be careful in how I talk about it, because I show up for my kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
even when I'm touched out, I'm showing up.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's where things stand right now. The door has always been left open. The guys
Yeah.
have been like, look, if you can make one happen, let us know. We'd love to have you. So it's not off the table. It's just, I've had to hit pause essentially right now at this stage of my life, just because there just hasn't been enough time.
Yeah. Yeah. Time is.
If I was in North Carolina, I would be on up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Like, I don't know. There's just so much funny things about being a parent that, I find being, I'm 40, and so
I'm 44, so
yeah. So like, it's hard, thinking that, like, so my nephews, and like I said, my brother's 4 years older than me. My nephews are 16 and 13, and it's weird being in a different space, and also just kind of like, as my energy levels and things like that, sometimes it's just, I want to wrestle, but my knees are so jacked up right now.
Oh yeah.
Like different things like that, or like my son like just randomly like hopped on me, and I was like, oh, my gird, like, just like stuff like that. And it's
parenthood is just, it is wild.
I mean, that's
wild.
the only way I know how to
describe it. It is feral. It is just crazy. But man, it's like, nothing has changed my perspective more than caring for two children, man. It sounds insane, but like,
no, it's not. It
my
doesn't sound insane to another
life,
parent. It doesn't sound insane. Yeah.
It just, I don't know about you, man, but like, I was a reluctant dad. And what I mean by that is, I wasn't rushing towards being a father. I was not resistant to it. I just didn't grow up around kids.
Yeah.
I'm from a very small family. There weren't little kids running around. And so, I was like hesitant, and, but man, they've just changed. They've changed me deeply. And,
there's a joy that I never knew until I had my sons.
Yeah. It's, it's otherworldly, man. Like, like the depths of, the way I describe it is like, it's like my daughters have opened up this pathway, in my heart that I didn't know was there.
Yeah.
And through therapy and talking about it and being a new dad and all that, like, they also have helped me rediscover that sensitive little dude, that like existed before life just, hits you, and like, I've been able to tap back into this like emotional part of me that I maybe had repressed, if I'm being honest. Like, and that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I've just been trying to lean into it, man. As exhausting as it is, it's like, you get to the end of the day and you're like, I feel like I lived 10 days today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how, and I like right now talking to you, I'm like, how am I going to wake up tomorrow and do that again? But you do it.
Yep.
you do it. You wake up and you do it, and somehow you find the ability to do it, and you know,
You adapt.
you
It's
adapt, and
yeah.
I don't know, man. It's I don't want to Hallmark card it because there's a lot of it's hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
I think it's one
But
of those it's one of those things that like it's the most unique experience I've ever been. I've never been so utterly exhausted one moment and laughing my ass off another, and
are full of
hugging
joy.
my
Like,
kids, or just just like trying to treasure whatever time that I have as they're growing older, and just trying to be present you know
dude, that is the word, man. Present. And
yeah,
like that's what has been very helpful for me as being an overthinker is like Remy is in the moment.
yeah,
I walked in today, Dad, let's play cars. I mean, as soon as I walk in, that's the first thing she says. All right, let's go play cars, kid. Where do you want to
yeah,
go?
yeah.
And we play Matchbox cars, and she's just thrilled, and it for me, it's always like it's a level set.
Yeah. There
You
was
know,
something that was like
she
super
doesn't care
interesting.
about the band. She
Oh
doesn't care
yeah,
about any of this. She
yeah,
could give two shits about any of that. All she wants is me in that moment to play with her.
right.
And there's something for someone that is always thinking ahead or thinking in reverse. It's been profound for me,
Yeah,
and it's really helped me with like my struggles with depression, which I've battled all of my adult life. It's I don't know. It's just it's been really beautiful for me and for
I
my
was
wife.
thinking when one of the things I never intended to get into child and adolescent therapy, but it just that was how it went down, and it just kept going down that path. So I did that for quite a few years. But I remember my child and adolescent class, I had a professor who was like, "You must learn to play. You must learn to play again. You must learn to be a kid again." And I get chills when I say that, because the invitation to play, right? The invitation to be childlike, and it's like you have to meet them on their level, right?
Oh yeah,
And
and they can sense it, man. They
oh
know.
yeah, and it's like
They know if you're
whether
phoning it in.
yeah, and just I was fortunate enough to, because I had to, with to be in order to be an effective therapist with younger kids who were going through
Oof.
extraordinary things, just tons of foster kids and trauma and like all this stuff. It's healing, but I had to let go of, like, I found a lot of joy and inhibition in just being able to play again,
Dude,
and to
I
get
feel
that
you.
sense, and
And not
yeah,
care.
yeah,
I think that's what's beautiful about it is like I find myself like in public, if we're out and Remy wants to play, whether it's like, hey, Dad, I want to make you dizzy and we spin in circles or whatever it is, like I don't even think twice. I don't care what anybody thinks.
yeah,
I'm just like, if this is what Remy wants, and if this is what's going to help her connect with me,
right,
which is all she wants, she just
yeah,
wants connection. We all want connection, like what you and I are doing right now.
yeah,
You just want to feel heard and seen. And, it's like, I just like, as someone who's guarded and reserved about stuff like that, like it is like, it's been amazing for me to just like, I don't care if like we're waiting in the Whole Foods line and she wants to do that. It's like, all
yeah,
right, kid, let's do it.
yeah. I one of the things that's been really interesting for me in parenting is sometimes for myself, I have to keep in mind that what I know now is through the benefit, like the way that I view how my parents raised me, or like it, the concepts that I maybe look back and are like, this is how this affected me and that affected me. Like, if there's anything that working with kids has taught me, is like how resilient kids are.
Mhm.
And like when I have to keep my own issues at bay when I'm parenting my kid, right? Like, and not just like whatever anger or frustration I have, but also remembering that like there I because of maybe my own stuff of not wanting to see my child get hurt or feel hurt or any of those
Sure.
things
Yeah.
of remember having to remind myself that like my child is not me, and I had the benefit of looking back on all this stuff when I was a kid, and in the moment it was the moment, right? And I wasn't thinking about like whatever emotional trauma like it, you know
Right.
what I mean, like, or trying to prevent that, or I was just the things that I needed: food, water, shelter, and just like, do my parents love me, right? Do my parents spend time with me? Like that's what I needed. And you know, as a dealing with teenagers today, sometimes there's this kind of concept that I think about where I feel like there's some form of what I call like trauma parenting, where it's like we have the
Sure.
benefit of these different things and looking back, we're looking back with adult minds,
Right.
right? And so like our kids need to go through hard things. They need to they need to become resilient. Like the way that we help that though is to help them through their emotions and just not
Mhm.
let them sink or swim, or not tell them to shut up, or not
Yeah.
tell, you know what I mean? It's like the amount of people that I sit in therapy with where it's like, who taught you not not just about like what the emotion is, but how to get through it,
Mhm.
right? And just like coaching my son of like, I know you're frustrated. Like,
Oh man, we
what
were dealing
what
with that last night.
yeah, what do we do about that? You
Hmm.
know, or like how do we deal with that? Um there's something, through the therapy process too, where kids want attention. There's no worse thing than no attention,
Oh man.
so they'd rather get it negatively
Oh,
or ideally positively, right? Like,
totally.
so eh, anything is better than just not being noticed,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And
And
I that's an adult thing too,
yeah,
like
I track with all of that, man. I mean, they're just mirrors. That's all they are,
yeah,
and they mirror you, and they also reflect, myself back at myself, and there's moments where I'm talking Remy down from a place of frustration, and I'm like, whoa, maybe I should take my own advice,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like, and that sounds cheesy, but like it's
It's
profound
true.
to me.
Yeah,
It's like I'll be like, take a deep breath, put your hand on daddy's chest,
yeah,
take a deep breath, and then like I'll get in traffic and like, you know,
yeah,
somebody will cut me off. It's like, oh wait, like that thought comes back in my head of like, oh well, if I'm modeling this for Remy or for Glory as she comes of age and can move and walk around, I should probably model this for myself too.
yeah.
So there's been moments like that for me where it's been like, oh, she's just a mirror holding my own advice back up to me, when I need it kind of put in front of
It's
me.
such an exposing thing,
Oh, dude,
right? Because
they're so
nothing will,
perceptive.
yeah,
Nothing gets by them.
yeah. I mean, the conversations like my wife and I have sometimes are just like, man, I was the other night, my son was just woke up and he was screaming for God knows what reason, and I just was losing it. And I was just lucky to have my dad was visiting, and I felt so embarrassed. Like I just felt so embarrassed, and like I talked with my dad because he was like, "Can I, just let me take him?" Because like no
He
judgment
could
or
sense it.
whatever,
Yeah.
you know. And just the next day I texted him, and I love my dad to death. I had really good parents, and I was like, I just felt really
Awesome.
embarrassed, and he was like, don't ever, like, there's no need to ever feel embarrassed in front of me. He's like,
Yeah.
your kids remind me a lot of you when you were younger, type of thing.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
just a couple things I just want to say, like, because I got to get going. My wife just got home
Yeah,
from
man.
work, and
Totally get it.
it's like almost 10 o'clock your time, or if not 11. It's almost
No, it's 10.
no, it's 10.
Yeah.
I something that struck was, you know, you just talking about the redemption of the album and just what an important, like, that's so cool, man. Like, I can't even tell you, like, that is such a cool thing. To, for me, I think like redemption, not only spiritually, but just faith, you know, in practice is so cool. And to be able to get to experience that and to share that with everybody else and see how everybody is like responding to it must be such, I don't know.
I'm just grateful. Yeah, I think
shared experience.
I'm just grateful, you know, at this point in my life that I get to have that experience. And you know, for the fans too, I do read everything that people post and send, and that's heartwarming too, you know, that it resonates, and that's all you could ask for, really. You know, so I'm just trying to embrace gratefulness, you know.
What are you working on music now? Or is it mostly just dadding and
no, I mean, we've got a couple things in the tank, you know. I mean, there's a couple Hopesfall songs that I was on with Hall of the Sky from those sessions that haven't seen the light of day. I'm hoping now that 2.0 is out that maybe EVR will, Equal Vision, the record label, maybe it'll fast forward maybe the release of those 3 songs as a unit, you know, that we wrote together. That's from 2019 when we wrote those. So pre-pandemic life. But and then in parallel, we've been sitting on 3 songs as well that we tracked last summer, and then life happened, you know, the adoption, and Lance moved, and you know, there's some health issues amongst the band. So we are reconvening in a couple of weeks. I have a spot on a lake in East Tennessee.
Nice.
I think we're going to drive out there and have a guys' weekend and kind of finalize those and then get those to mix. So 6 new songs, Hopesfall 3, in parallel 3. So I'm hoping those will come out soon-ish, you know. So
awesome. And yeah, I it's funny, before I need to get to Tennessee specifically, my brother goes there all the time for
beautiful state, man.
Stuff. Yeah. Well, we had a choice between, I was like, either New Orleans or Tennessee was going to, or Nashville was going to be our things. We decided to go to New Orleans, which is fantastic.
Yeah, New Orleans is great. Super hot. Super Louisiana is so hot.
Yeah. it was it's a trip, but I got to get out to Tennessee for sure.
Well, if you ever come over, Nashville, man, let me know. Hit me up. I'd be happy to
I'd love that.
Grab coffee or whatever.
Yeah, I got a friend, an old-time friend. He owns a coffee shop called Osa, I think it's called.
Okay, yeah.
Osa Coffee, small coffee stand, like micro roaster type thing.
I love coffee,
so years. Yeah, it's in just thanks so much for talking.
No, man, thanks for having me on. I always appreciate it, man. For sure.
It's so therapeutic for me. Just in general, it's kind of my own type of therapy. So
I get it. It is for me too, man. And the fact that it's always nice to connect the dots and chat with somebody new. You know, always
there's
appreciate
so much more I would love to talk about, just even in terms of like video production and like all of that stuff. But
next time around, maybe if we do another one.
Well, I'm open to it anytime. So that does it for this episode. Thanks for listening. You can find us on all major podcasting platforms, as well as Instagram and TikTok at The Scenecast. As always, thanks for listening.